Welcome back everybody, my name is Nick930 and this is my review for the recently released Resident Evil 2. Resident Evil 2 is a remake of the original 1998 survival horror classic, with enhanced graphics, new level layouts, and completely reworked control schemes. Despite it being directly inspired by everything from the original game, this new take on Resident Evil 2 feels like an entirely brand new experience, and a surprisingly solid survival horror experience at that. It's refreshing having a game with zombies that is genuinely challenging, requiring a strong understanding of all the game's many elements to successfully reach the credits. So first, let's talk about Resident Evil 2's story. This reimagining of the 1998 title is still strongly based on the same narrative. You'll play as either Claire Redfield or Leon Kennedy, as you explore Raccoon City during a massive viral outbreak. Soon after arriving in the city, the two are forced to split up and seek shelter in a massive museum retrofitted into a police station. It's here where a good portion of the game takes place, as players will run back and forth looking for various key items in order to restore the power and find a safe exit. All of the characters from the original game make appearances, only they've been expanded on in some significant ways. Marvin, for example, now is given a more prominent role, and now resides in the center atrium as opposed to shutting himself off in a side room early on. All the vocal performances are done well, though there are a few moments that feel unearned, mainly a very dramatic moment about partway through the game after you leave the station. All in all though, I feel that this remake executes the narrative vision much better than the original, and the epic Hollywood moments that they were going for in the finale feel much more impactful than they did before. But the story is one of the few parts of this game that have seen some very minimal changes, at least when compared to the substantial alterations made to the gameplay experience. Rather than just remaking the game with some nicer graphics and small layout changes like the original Resident Evil remake on the GameCube, Capcom decided to build this version of Resident Evil 2 from the ground up, with an entirely different control scheme and camera system. Resident Evil 2 utilizes an over-the-shoulder camera like Resident Evil 4 through 6, and will require the player to manually aim their weapon with a crosshair, rather than just shooting from the hip repeatedly. This adds a new element to the experience. Zombies are now much harder targets to shoot at as they sway back and forth and stumble towards you. And the ammunition, just like the original, is very hard to come by, especially in the later stages of the game. Zombies will require multiple shots to the head with weaker weapons, and even if they happen to fall to the ground, they're prone to stand right back up a few moments later. You can always destroy their heads with enough ammo, but it's also not necessarily worth it. After wasting a lot of ammo in one of my first playthroughs, I found myself completely out of options to defeat one of the later bosses. I was forced to reload my progress from earlier in order to be more conservative about my ammunition. And this is what I meant earlier when I said you have to have a strong understanding of everything going on in this game. Every item you find on the ground can be used to your advantage in some way, whether they be keys, notes to open combination locks, or grenades. Like most Resident Evil games, players will need to very carefully manage their inventory space. Each item will take up 1 to 2 item slots, meaning you'll need to choose carefully what items you want to bring with you at any given time. You can drop off items in one of the few item crates in the game, but the paths between these points are often filled with dangerous enemies, including the standard zombies, the blind but deadly lickers, and most deadly of all, Mr. X. I was a bit surprised when I ran into Mr. X, as he originally didn't appear so early on, and he adds a significant difficulty spike to the gameplay experience that I feel is a bit premature. While I appreciate the challenge, Mr. X's non-stop search for you as you try to solve one of the early police station puzzles kind of hurt the flow of the game. Shooting him enough will stun him for a few seconds, but he cannot be killed, and you'll need to memorize specific rooms throughout the game that he refuses to enter, like safe rooms and certain puzzle rooms. He seems to automatically search rooms within your area, and will always move towards any gunfire or aggroed zombies, so it's recommended that you complete necessary challenges before he arrives to make the final few puzzles in the station easier to take care of. After the police station, the game does begin to lose a bit of its charm, just like the original did. Zombies become less common, and in their place are much more challenging enemies with incredibly small windows for you to dodge their attacks. Again, if you're not prepared for these areas, they can be a painful experience, especially on the hardcore difficulty. But at the same time, it's a rewarding experience. Sneaking past lickers, finding solutions to puzzles, and cleverly bypassing enemy encounters is exactly what made the original game so much fun, and this remake delivers that feeling perfectly. I felt I was given a fair challenge all the way through, and after finally completing my initial scenario, I was rewarded with some classic costumes, character models to look at in the bonus section of the main menu, and a new option to complete the B scenario, giving me a chance to experience the opposite character story in relation to my initial playthrough. I'm a little disappointed that Scenario B doesn't really represent all the things I managed to accomplish in my first playthrough. Things like blocked paths and locked doors are all sealed again, which doesn't really make sense from a story perspective. From a gameplay perspective it's fine, and having everything already open would have been way too easy. But it would have been cool to see things like windows that I boarded up still sealed, or items that I left behind for my second character available to pick up. It seems as if the intention here was to make Scenario B not so much the other side of the story, but more so a what-if scenario, which just seems like a missed opportunity. Still, it's an interesting way to have a New Game Plus, and replaying the story from the very beginning with a different character also results in a few changes, making it worth playing the game at least 4 times, just like the original game, only with a much less forgiving difficulty curve. In addition to all the gameplay changes, this remake features an incredible leap forward in terms of graphics. The Raccoon City Police Department and the surrounding area look incredible now, and effects like rain, lighting, and shadows all help to create an unrivaled experience. This is a truly horrifying game thanks to the beautiful attention to detail put into the environments and the enemies that inhabit them. Hallways are significantly darker now, requiring the player to shine a flashlight just to see. All the most memorable environments make a welcome return, but there are a few disappointing omissions, like the station area and a few minor enemies like giant spiders and moths. However, everything that was included looks fantastic and runs great on the PC platform that I tested, with frame rates far exceeding 100 FPS on the highest settings. The only problem I really had with this game's graphics were the terribly implemented reflective surfaces. I've tried all combinations of settings to get this to look right, but the reflective surfaces just look glitchy and broken. I noticed the same problem in the demo versions of the PS4 Pro and Xbox One X, and it really hurts the presentation, especially in the later stages. Other smaller issues are locked 30Hz animations for distant enemies, and some repetitive zombie designs being reused throughout the game. Still, when stacked up to the original from 20 years ago, it's just incredible to see how much better the graphics are. And now, we get a real idea of how horrifying this police station was originally intended to be. The Resident Evil 2 remake is a prime example of how to reimagine a classic. Rather than just improving the graphics and the frame rate, Capcom went above and beyond to recreate all of our favorite moments while also keeping it just different enough to keep the veteran players on their guard. This game was brilliant back in 1998, and is still just as brilliant now, with only incredibly minor issues holding it back. After having played every entry to the series over the past year, I can safely say that this new Resident Evil 2 game is one of the best entries to ever be given the Resident Evil title. I highly recommend both fans and newcomers alike give this game a try, and hopefully, remakes from other developers in the future will follow Capcom's lead and try to match this level of perfection. Thank you all for watching, and if you want to learn more about Resident Evil, be sure to check out my History of Resident Evil video linked at the end. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos like this posted every week.